back to the We Are LA Tech podcast. So excited for our next guest. Community organizers for an owner-operated tour happening in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills to be specific. So excited to bring onto the show Mariyam and Greg. Hello.
Hello, Espree.
Hello, Espree.
So excited to have you on the show. You're putting together an amazing event happening tonight. Crazy. Tell us about it.
For the event today, we're going to be talking about a business model like we are passionate about because it has created a lot of millionaires, but it's not really well understood. So we'll bring 5 franchisors to come and present how you can succeed with their concept. And they'll present each for 5 minutes. And then there's 3 minutes of questions from the audience. And then after that, there's an hour of networking where we match people who want to own businesses without needing to invent a new concept and, find product market fit. So they can start with a business model that they already know works or they believe works and they have data on that. This year, we're doing 10 of these events across 7 cities. And this is the first one we are doing in LA, and we'll be back in October again.
So exciting. And I can't wait to talk about how you got passionate about this in the first place. But first, I want to welcome your teammate, Mariyam, and I want to hear a bit about both of your backgrounds. Mariyam, how did you join Greg in putting this event together?
So we go way back in the day. We worked together in the past and we met in New York at a networking event. But we joined together like slightly over a year ago when Wefranch was just getting founded. And we're working remotely. Then we are working in New York now. That's where we're based. Yeah, and we're excited to build Wefranch.
And today is all about this underground opportunity to start a company that is crazy. I can't wait to share Greg's story. Make sure to tune into the Women in Tech podcast, where we're going to get deep dive into Mariyam's background and how she became passionate about tech and business. Let's start with that introduction before we go even further. So Mariyam, since we were just talking to you, tell us just a little snapshot about who you are and what you do.
So I come from Uzbekistan, which is a country in Central Asia. And ever since I was a child, I was obsessed with, coming to America, like many are, watching the movies. And it was a long path, but I made it to Vanderbilt, which is a university in Nashville. And then I moved to New York, which was another dream. And I'm working at a tech startup, which was yet another dream. So at Wefranch, I do everything on the business side. So I work with the product and with growth and marketing and bringing, our product to market, finding people that are interested in franchises.
And what moves you about Greg? Why is he the founder that you really believe in?
So I think ever since we met, I was very impressed because he's like an immigrant like myself. And, it's hard enough to be an immigrant in this country, but to be like a founder, to be building like a great startup, that's amazing. So I think I respect Greg, and I definitely deeply believe in the vision that we're pursuing at Wefranch.
And Greg, I am so excited for you to share your story. I was so moved when Greg and Mariyam reached out and said hello. When I heard Greg's story, I'm just I'm so inspired. I believe in this event that they're putting together tonight so much. By the way, if you want to check out the event, go to wearelatech.com/event. That's wearelatech.com/event and RSVP there. Greg, tell us about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I usually start with, I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. So I'm from the poor parts of Lagos, Nigeria. So Lagos, as you get closer to the water, there are lots of rich people. And as you go more inland, there are, poor people. And the thing about the third world, it's not all like Lagos. It's not that there are no rich people. There are many rich people, but there's no middle class. So there are poor people and there are rich people, and you hardly interact. Your whole life, you won't meet someone, and even maybe you serve them, or you don't get exposed to them. But I was good at taking tests. So when I was 10 years old, I did really well on the tests. So I went to Loyola Jesuit College. It's an American school. It's a boarding school in the capital, in Abuja. And so then you get to live and meet a lot of really rich kids. And they vacation in London, in New York, and you learn how their parents make money. They usually own businesses, and their businesses work. They generate cash flow. And they usually have brands. And then you go back home for holidays to where you're from, which is, Lagos, Yanapaja, open sewers, no running water. My parents start businesses, their friends start businesses, and they all fail. So there are many of these people where, my parents' friends, they will have their kids hawking goods all day. So that's free labor. And the business still doesn't work. So all the time I'm thinking, how it doesn't make sense. Like, I think my mother is literally a genius. I think she's very smart and she works really hard and we just can't make money. And like in school, I see people it seems easy. So I'm always thinking, how do people make money? And at home, we said our value is not about money. We have different values, but I see it affects our life. In any case, you keep going, and then eventually I end up in Princeton. I'm good at taking tests again, so I do well on some tests, and I end up in Princeton. It's more of the same. So like one of my close friends, he was actually my senior year roommate, very humble guy and very soulful. I actually associate soulfulness with going through difficulty. Anyway, so I didn't expect him to be wealthy, but his dad owns one of the biggest hotel chains in Colombia. So eventually you discover that. So I'm always thinking, trying to learn from him. How do you even start? And then eventually I end up at Goldman Sachs. And this is where I'll be like, these are people that's kind of, nobody else is in school. Nobody else talks about this. Goldman is the one place where we explicitly talk about how is wealth created. We think about it all the time. Lloyd Blankfein, he's a hero of mine. He says, this is like during 2009. So everybody hates Goldman. And he says, we are doing God's work. We get people with ideas that work in the real world. It doesn't have to be the smartest person. It doesn't have to be the sexiest idea. It has to work in this universe that we're in. What does that mean? You're able to pay employees well. You're able to get returns for your investors, and consumers want to buy your goods at fair prices. So if you get those three parties, like a three-body problem, and they're all in conflict with each other. But if you get those three things to work with some concept, then we back you. We support you. We get you capital. You grow. You hire more people. That's how you build New York. He will say, think of North Korea, South Korea. DNA-wise, it's the same people. You couldn't scientifically differentiate a North Korean from a South Korean. In the 60s, people used to escape from South Korea to go to North Korea. And they have the same land, basically the same texture of land, basically the same size. And now South Korea is a first world country. Anyway, so I really got into this idea. And then I founded a startup called ThinkNum, where we collected data and we provided it to hedge funds and PE companies that are also obsessed with this idea. Like, that's all Warren Buffett thinks about all day. Who has a differentiated concept? And most people are just not thinking of that. But this is all these people that we were serving, like Citadel Points of Two, they were customers. And now we discovered this thing called franchising. It has created the most millionaires. There are 800,000 of them. Honestly, it's not the sexiest idea, but it works. And it's a great way where if you find a concept, just like the great PE firms or the great hedge funds do, then you can get to own it by bringing it to your local territory. So that's what we're working on now.
It's so interesting because when I first got into entrepreneurship, I actually studied franchising. So when you reached out, I am not allergic to the word franchise because I had studied this, and I know it's a really cool opportunity. But I think society-wise, the branding of the word franchise is like, So it was really exciting and interesting to hear how important and accessible it is to create a business through becoming how do you say it, a franchisee?
Yes, the franchisee.
Franchisee. Before we get more into that, I don't want to skip over, how do you go from complete poverty to working, what did you say, Goldman Sachs?
Yep.
How do you do that with no money? How'd you go to the great schools and everything?
Yep. So I think, as I said, I was good at taking tests. So many people look at tests and they get like 10s. They don't like tests. They say, let's banish the SATs. I loved it because it was the only way where I will have an advantage. Right. So if there are no tests, nobody's going to pick me. In short, like there's no way, like Princeton will pick me, Goldman will pick me. So anyway, so I was really good at taking tests and I enjoyed taking tests. As for example, there's an exam in Nigeria where everybody has to take to get into college.
Right.
Over 1 million people took it and I had a single high score. So till today, I'm still proud of it. And I had 59 out of 1600 SATs. So that helped me get into school. I just enjoyed taking tests. And from there, I ended up at Goldman. So one thing, which is similar to the events we do, Goldman and all these investment banks, they're very selective. And what they do is they go to target schools and they recruit there. And it's very important for you to go there and meet them one-on-one and make an impression. So in a similar way, the best franchisors are also very selective. But it's very hard for you to go and meet them right now. They don't come to you. So it's partly what we are trying to do with this tour, where we are getting these great concepts to actually go to the communities where they intend to find a franchise owner and connect with them and recruit them.
That is true that a franchisor isn't necessarily accessible. It's like you're thinking about the tech, legends in the world. You can't just give them a call or shoot them an email, or even if you ask them, hey, can I pick your brain for coffee? You'll never hear back. And so you are bringing the inaccessible to the public to make it accessible and make this opportunity attainable. Mariyam, tell us about this pitch event tonight. What excites you? Who's coming? What can people expect? And tell us about Studio, which is one of the most beautiful places in Los Angeles.
We're excited that we made the right pick. But the deeper idea that I think we're touching upon here is that like a lot of things in life you look at, and you maybe even like or admire or use them, but you don't imagine yourself being on the other side. So we did a webinar with someone named Alan Boomer. So he's a successful franchisee, and he was telling us about how his children, for them, they look at all the franchises and they can kind of conceptualize and imagine being on the other side. The 7-Eleven, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, all those brands, we interact and see them, every day on the street, but you just don't imagine yourself being, on the other side of the counter. Yeah, being the owner of this. So the biggest thing about this event is trying to unveil, right, the cover between the side of being a customer of a great franchise and being on the other side as a franchisee. So the event, I guess we come from the tech background. So a lot of the startup demos, pitch competitions, they're very dynamic and kind of fast-paced. So you get a limited amount of time to pitch your concept. Everyone likes to talk about themselves, especially, the franchisors. There's so many details to touch upon. We would like to keep it concise to respect, people's attention. And then we select only 5 brands. And we try to, have a variety of brands so that it's not just food, because a lot of people think, franchising is mainly, this great...
Oh, like fast food joints.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But really, there's a franchise almost in any industry, any space that you can imagine where there is, a service, local service aspect. So we keep a good variety.
Give us an example, a wellness service.
So for example, today we'll have this, wellness recovery franchise that's mobile. So, first of all, it doesn't...
Oh, mobile.
Exactly. So number one, it doesn't need a brick and mortar location.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And kind of like any industry, youth enrichment, home services, wellness, beauty, there's a franchise brand within that category. So yeah, we'll only have 5, and each presenter will have 5 minutes to make their short pitch. We keep it very short. And then for 3 minutes, we'll take questions from, our guests and the audience, so that people can ask any questions.
And it's Shark Tank style.
Exactly. And really, the interesting part is that in franchising, the prize for the franchisor is to find the right operator.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a gem to find a person whom you're going to trust your brand, in a local territory. So it's, they're kind of part of a family or a team. So that's the price. And, the second part of the event, the second hour, is networking. So each attendee can come up to the franchisor that they're interested in and just ask them any questions. And moreover, some of the franchisors are bringing their franchisees. So, it's kind of like with parents and kids. Sometimes you wouldn't ask the parent a certain question, but you can ask a child, because, they're your friend.
Yeah.
So similarly, with franchisees, you can ask more targeted questions about, how much they make, what is it really like?
Yeah.
Of course, the franchisor has a certain narrative, right, about how the brand is.
Totally.
But you're asking the franchisee, okay, if I do this, what am I going to be going through? What am I signing up for? So that's the event.
And technology comes into all of this because Wefranch is a tech company, and it's really interesting. Greg, can you speak to the tech behind Wefranch and why these events even exist?
Sure. So I think where I'll start from is at Goldman, I was a strat. So when I say Goldman, people usually think, he was a banker or a trader, so cool. No. So when my first day on the job, there's someone called Ken Castellino. He's a partner now at Goldman. So then he was the VP, so he's junior. Anyway, but I was an analyst, so I was even more junior. And he comes in and he says, first thing, look around. This is like a James Bond movie, right? He's also an immigrant. And I'm like, yeah, this is like a James Bond movie. This is so cool. And then he's like, yes, just remember, you're not James Bond. You're like Q, the older guy that you provide code to James Bond, the saleswomen and salesmen that take risk. You're not taking risk. But I really love that group. There are about 800 strats. Usually physics PhDs, and they build models to support traders. So in 2013, I founded a company that was similar to Strat, where essentially I was crawling data at Goldman because we needed data from
when you use the word strat, are you meaning strategy, or is that a different?
Yeah, it's very interesting because there are also people called strategists. So it's a short form of strategist, but we're not allowed to call ourselves strategists because there was a different group that were called strategists. So yes, but it's a short form of strategist, but it has become its own thing called strats. Yes, but it's short form. Like I would say it's like today you call them data scientists.
Okay.
Like, yep. So anyway, and I was scraping data because I needed data from the web to know home prices in sandy states, how they were doing. And I got yelled at by another friend of mine, but then he was also my boss, Yuha. Because we're not supposed to just scrape data from the web. You could be getting material, non-public information. You're supposed to go to compliance. It made no sense to me. But a bunch of my friends from college working at hedge funds also needed similar data. So I started saying, there could be a thing here I could solve. And I really love web crawling, scraping data. So I built a company that all we did was scrape data from the web, and we provided it to hedge funds and PE firms that are thinking which businesses should we invest in.
Right.
So eventually we sold that company, and then I was thinking of what to do next. And then there is someone that phrased this really well. In today's world, if you're building, you want to build in AI or as far from AI as possible. So I don't want to build in AI. It's kind of like, it's like a pig on LSD. You just don't know which way it could go. So it's like rich man games. Like if my dad had like $1 billion, maybe it would work. But for me, I wanted to build as far from AI as possible. And we noticed that when people are picking franchises, which franchise should you open? A, you might not even know of them.
Right.
And then B, they will almost never use data.
Right.
They won't do it the way a PE firm does it. They will use their gut, I like this service or something like that. So we wanted to provide the best data to them. So that's what we do. We index data from FDDs, reviews from current franchisees, and we provide them to people who want to buy a franchise. That means we have this online database of many people who are looking for franchises, so we can host events in different cities in ways that it would be very hard to do if it was not, you were not matching them online.
And is it expensive to get it? Because it feels expensive. I mean, every business, even if you're starting a tech company, even though we have no code and all these things today that make it so much more accessible than when I got started, it's still just expensive to do things.
I think of it like two ways. Like if you have an idea that works, capital is looking for a great operator with a de-risked idea. So it's the risk aspect. So when you're doing a startup, it's very risky. You might never find product market.
You had a startup before Wefranch.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was a company that indexed data from the web, but we were inventing something new. So you don't know, for many years, it might never work. So it's risky. So that's why you need venture capital money. But if you have an idea that works, trillions and trillions go into new projects all the time. Anyway, the key thing with franchises is they are cash flowing businesses. For many of them, if you find one where they've opened 100 locations, you can get like SBA financing, and many people can partner with you where essentially, of course, it might take money to build a brick and mortar, but because it's de-risked, certainly in places like America, you can finance it. There are many ways to finance it because it's cash flowing from day one. Versus if you're doing a startup, you're going to run some experiment that might or might never work.
Yeah.
So in other words, so with franchising, you can start it without a lot of money because you can get SBA financing or equity partners.
What's not a lot of money? Like what's the low end of being able to enter a franchise that we'd actually want to enter? Like not something that, I don't want that one.
Yep. So I think one that, they talk about on the event and it's really on their website, but we obviously don't want to speak too much on their behalf, so you should check it out yourself, is like, for example, Chick-fil-A. It's a very popular concept. And all it costs out of pockets to start is $10,000.
$10,000 to start a Chick-fil-A.
That's correct. That's all it costs the franchise owner to start out of pocket. That's all it will cost. But many people might not know that. So that's something like Brian Corbett will be talking about. And in general, remember with
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Who is the speaker speaking on that tonight?
Yep. So the speaker is like Brian Corbett. So he's the director of franchisee recruitment for Chick-fil-A, and they run into this problem where many people don't already know this. So if you don't know this, you won't even apply because you'll be thinking, it cost me millions. I don't have millions.
Yeah, it feels like it would cost millions.
Exactly.
Because something like McDonald's does, cost over $2 million.
Okay.
So yeah, it makes sense why people think that.
Yep. But even like with the McDonald's, with SBA financing, you can put down, it varies from like 10% to 20%. So even if it costs, let's say $1 million, you only need to put down $100K to $200K. And on our platform, we also match people who like are willing to invest, and then they won't operate it, with people who want to operate but don't have the equity to put down. So it can be, and there are many like non-brick and mortar franchises where they're just like max it costs $100,000, and then you can still get financing for that. So we think franchising is one of the most accessible ways to become an entrepreneur.
And are you able to sell a franchise in general?
So in general, yes.
Sorry, there's two kinds. There's the franchisee and the franchisor. So the franchisor owns like all the monopoly pieces, and the franchisee just has one of the moving pieces. Is the franchisee able to sell their franchise? So they don't own all of them, just theirs.
Exactly. So that's a great question. I will say for 99% of concepts, yes. So the franchisee is the local business owner. So they are the person that owns the business, and then they're partner with the franchisor. So I'll say usually, yes, the franchise owner is able to.
But you should always check.
Yes, you should always check.
I kind of want to get into that. I want to get into what questions as potential franchisees, what questions should we be asking or inquiring about? And then also, I know, Miriam, you had shared, if you're comfortable sharing more, that one of your dreams is to be a franchisor one day. And so I would love to hear more about how is that even possible? Can someone be that? But let's start with, what are the questions people aren't thinking of? Because, I mean, getting into a franchise for as little as $10,000 and having a cash flow business, you literally can't even buy a car for $10,000. So it's crazy. It's like a crazy underground opportunity, which I personally think has a bad PR rep. Like, you hear the word franchise, you're like, nah, and really it's this, like you said, you're like, I wanted to discover, how are people getting wealthy? Really? Like, where is the access to wealth? And then you discovered this world of franchises, and you're like, oh, why aren't more people doing this? Why do people not know that it's $10,000 to get into a Chick-fil-A? Let me start making that information more known and accessible to the community at large. So what questions should we be asking if we are opening up our minds to the opportunity of, maybe I want to own a franchise? What are the questions we're looking for when we're inquiring with the different franchisors?
So I'll say, for me, I'll start with, do they have pricing power? Almost, if you're investing in any business, are they able to charge the customer slightly extra? Are they making extra margins? So what are their margins? Are they unit profitable? So that's probably the most important thing. Like, so if you find a franchise where if you're running a business where you have pricing power, whether you're Warren Buffett or you're a local business owner, business works. It's almost like the basis of everything. Whether we like it or not. So I'll say that's the key thing. The next thing is, will you be a great operator? Because franchising almost never works well as a passive opportunity.
Oh, interesting.
So the beautiful thing, in my opinion, so some people don't like it, but the beautiful thing about franchising, in my view, if you're a franchise owner, it almost combines a job and an investment. So you're sort of an investor in the concept, but you're also, in many ways, sort of like an employee. We don't say that,
right,
but you work on it.
Right.
So that means that you have agency. You can change things. You can hustle. So if you have almost like any job, if you're uniquely positioned to execute on that opportunity, and it has pricing power, then it's usually a recipe for success. Like, where you're just the person that should be playing this game, and this game tends to be profitable. So those are the things we sort of think about. And usually it's also a long-term investment. You should think about, am I trying to build this over time? And ideally, you want to get into multi-unit franchising, where you own one, then it's cash flowing. So you use that to own 4, and then you own 8, and then you own 12, and then you have managers that work underneath it, and you're not operating it every day. Yeah. So those are the steps we think about.
I think I really appreciate that you share that you have to be actively involved, because there are certain businesses that I think sometimes people buy a business in any way, whether it's a franchise or not, and they just think it's going to run itself, and they don't. For me particularly, I'm so passionate about culture. They don't invest any thoughts into culture. They just think, oh, if I open this gym, they're just going to want to work out. Well, no, it's like, what are your trainers like? What are the people at your front desk like? How do you feel when you walk in? Is your place clean? What kind of, community cheer are you doing outside of your doors? I think it's so important for people to understand in order to create the life that they want, they need to show up to the life that they want. There are certain opportunities in the world, I'm sure, like investments or this and that, where you don't really need to show up. You just put your money in and it just does its thing, or you lose all your money.
Exactly.
In the safeguarding of this type of business, if you have a proven business model that is cash flow. So a lot of the risk, as you're talking about, as long as you show up to it, the risks are a lot less than in comparable opportunities where you don't even know if you're going to make a buck at it.
And then the important point here is that usually the franchisee doesn't need to have like technical experience. Like maybe even if they're like running a restaurant, yes, they need to understand like operations or like a home services brand, but they're not going to be like the electrician, doing the work. Usually the franchisee is responsible for kind of like setting up the territory and like setting up the market. So getting the word out, whether it's a gym, or it's a beauty thing, it's a like child's, educational class, getting the word out to the local community, making those ties. So it tends to be like a very like leadership focused role.
Totally.
And like someone we spoke with, like an ex-NFL player, his name is Henry Anderson. So he like is opening up an acai bowl concept in Nashville. And we kind of like asked him about this, aspect of...
Now you're making me hungry.
Yes, they're good. Of like being an active operator versus, he's had a long career in the NFL. Like he must be kind of tired and just wanting to be in Florida. Right. And he was like, well, how can I expect people to really work hard when they don't know their owner? Of course, they'll do their job and they'll, get their paycheck. But when I come there and I, talk to them and I kind of like, we feel that connection, the way they show up for the customers is different.
Even notable names that you think have all the money in the world already are either buying franchises or starting, like Jake Paul. Right? Yep. Mm-hmm. He just bought. Do you know a little bit of background on that one?
We just saw in the news.
Yeah, exactly. So it just, I think the concept is called Doghouse. I
think he bought a franchise. He's not the franchisor.
No, so he's just a multi-unit franchisee. So I think, bigger name athletes, they tend to buy like a multi-unit deal for a specific territory, and they're just going to like develop it over time.
Yep, and I think like social capital. So if you have social capital, and when Miriam was talking about
social capital, like if someone has a huge Instagram following or a huge YouTube following.
Exactly, and sure, you can get paid for posts, but you can also own it locally. And then you have a reason to kind of promote your own locations, which is what you're saying, Jake Paul. And just even on a smaller scale, maybe you're not a nationwide celebrity, but in your community, you're also known and people respect you. That if I come to your place, I'll be treated fairly. So that is social capital. And people want an owner. They want to do business where they know the owner has they feel like they have some view on their integrity, for example.
Let's talk about that, and then let's move into how to even become a franchisor. But let's talk about, we're in Los Angeles, the land of creators. And they're trying all these business models from merchandise. Mr. Beast opened the hamburger chain, etc. Like as creator, we do brand deals, the whole thing, right? I don't think creators at all, I mean, I don't know. I haven't asked them. I haven't surveyed. But if on gut instinct, I don't think one of them is thinking about franchises.
Yes, I agree.
And I think from what you're sharing...
They should.
Yeah. Yes. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one group of people we think have done well with that will be athletes. And I think the one thing we talk about with creators, so there's an aspect of ego. That's just, let's put it out there, where you want to create your own thing. There's some benefit from doing that. But there's also some humility in knowing that to create a concept that works in the universe, it's almost like a gift from the universe. So you should respect that. So if you just say, I want to be creator, and you want to build a business just on your back, selling something, but if that thing is not your specialty,
right,
then I think it can be challenging in the long run.
Yeah.
So the best thing could be to partner with someone who has created a concept where they've put their heart and soul into it, and it just works. That's product market fit. And then you partner with them as the local owner. So we think that's how creators should engage more with franchises, and we think it will happen, but we are far from there right now.
And just to add to that, so franchising is kind of the perfect middle ground between, you see these great brands like Apple, right? But like you can really, I mean, I guess you can invest into Apple as like a publicly traded company, but like with a lot of brands, like how do you get a little piece of that brand? Like usually you can't. So with franchise, yes, you can actually get their like IP like locally. And unlike a lot of the brand deals where ultimately you're driving traffic and interest to like, someone else's like sales,
right?
You're driving traffic to like your local store. And, people usually they're like unable to buy or get the service anywhere else. So they're coming to you.
You could even do meet and greets at your own shop.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly correct. So anything you do where you drive and you're creating, remember, you might not be popular forever, but so athletes do that well. While you are in the spotlight, you use that to create a business that will now last beyond you. But you do the meet and greets in your local location, and then you create this permanent equity that will now on its own take off.
That's so
we think,
cool.
Yeah, we think there's an opportunity. There are some VCs that are excited about these kinds of partnerships. Like some people, like Yoni from Slow Ventures has talked about ideas like this, but we do think it will happen.
It's so interesting. I had definitely never heard of that. I'm very excited for the event tonight. Let's talk about franchisors.
So an example that comes to mind is there is a company called Sandbox VR. So they like provide VR experiences to people. So you like put on headsets, like we would be in this kind of room. And then, we enter the VR game experience and we like, play. So originally they were like a tech company, like a traditional tech startup. They raised from A16Z, but they had this problem where like I think they were thinking about selling the headset itself, but they were based in Hong Kong and people have like very small apartments. So they just like wouldn't have enough space around them to like actually move around like in the game. So they were like, okay, like we actually need a space to offer this experience for people because it's also fun to play together when like your peers, your friends are in the same room. So that's how they kind of stumbled into franchising because they need these local spaces to set up, the game. So, and I think like this to me shows like the idea of the franchisor and franchising that there is a concrete like limitation for the founder, the franchisor, that they cannot overcome. Like, yes, they came up with a brand. They like found something magical, something special, something that works. But in order to scale it, like they need local operations. So they need people that are going to drive this locally. And I think for me personally, the like beautiful idea is that like being with people like in business is one of the, most beautiful like kind of like relationships you can have because it's like productive. You like show up, like you bring your best self to work. And like in franchising, the franchisor and the franchisee, it's a very long-term win-win productive relationship, right? Where the franchisor can only succeed when the franchisees are like doing well, right? And the franchisees can continue thriving when the brand is growing.
Walk us through how franchising is not MLM.
So I'll say two things. Well, to some extent, it is like that. So I will say like we've been sort of pro-franchising in this podcast and we believe in its potential, but I also think it's kind of not really regulated the way stocks are, like before 1933 and 1934. So it's similar to like bucket shops where not every franchise is good. Not every franchise is profitable. Some are good and some are bad. That's partly why we use data. Finding the right ones means you can succeed. Finding the wrong ones means you can lose a lot. So we think they're terrible ones. But the difference in MLMs is with a franchise, one, it is regulated by the FTC. So you have to report things in documents called FDDs. So you have to report financials. And with LMMs, it's like a chain of people selling other things. So they're always selling the dream down the road. Here, the franchisees have to be profitable. The franchisor, for the most part, they make money off royalties, a percentage of your revenue. So that means as the local owner needs to make even more profits than the royalties, otherwise they'll just shut down. And you also have to report whether people are shutting down. So to build think of let's just say like McDonald's. So that's just all like great concepts over like decades. The local owners need to make profits. It's not quite the same with MLMs where people just make it just by constantly selling down the road. So that's the key difference.
And just to add to that, so coming back to like the conversation about like a lot of franchises are like scammy. I think because people are being pitched to and there's not enough tools for kind of like, venturing into franchising and like being educated about it. So maybe like, we've heard like people will text you on LinkedIn and they like pitch their franchise or on Facebook, right? So, and like when you don't know these things and you don't know like how the model even works and like, is it good? Like there's kind of like natural fear and like distance. So like a lot of modern age platforms, like even like Zillow, right? Like nobody's probably like texting you on LinkedIn to like buy a house. You just go on Zillow to find like the exact house that you want in an exact territory, right? That fits your budget and like a bunch of other criteria. So yeah, with Wefranch, like I think the idea is that and with the event as well, you can kind of like start building this like framework of what a franchise is. So like even the FDD that you mentioned, so it's, the franchise disclosure document. It's the main document about a specific franchise. So any business that calls itself a franchise, like legally needs to have this document. And it has these like 23 items that describe what this franchise is, how is it special, how much money do you need to start it, how much will you pay to the franchisor, like, during your operations. So yeah, just this idea of like franchising works like slightly differently. But once you understand the very simple like nature of how it works, that franchisor, franchisee, you pay to set up your location and then you just pay a percentage of your revenue to the franchisor to grow the brand. Just having that like, mental model helps explore other franchises in like an educated, data-driven way.
And to have those resources, go to Wefranch, WEFRANCH.com, because that's where you have the data and resources to be educated in a safeguarded way, right? Can you tell us more about the resources you provide the community so they can make smart decisions?
Sure. So I think there is this question on Wall Street. It says, so where are the customers' yachts? So like many times they're like investment brokers are rich, but like where are the customers' yachts kind of? So ultimately for us, why we believe in franchising versus say MLMs is there are over 800,000 franchisees. So there are hundreds of thousands of franchise owners that have succeeded and become millionaires. And there are also many great concepts that have succeeded. So what we do is we index data, all of this data from the franchise disclosure documents, and we make them available for free. So that is one thing. The second thing is the ability to talk to actual franchise owners.
Yeah, like tonight.
Exactly. And online to get reviews, kind of like you will with Glassdoor. So, okay, you claim like you have this concept and it's going to make me rich. Well, has it made anybody else rich? And can I talk to them directly when you are not in the room? If they're not doing well, many times they'll leave reviews that say, don't get into this franchise. They don't provide support, or the franchisor does not have integrity and they don't have your long-term interest. So transparency. So that's what we're trying to bring. So data from FDDs, historical data from FDDs, reviews, and then finally, for you to actually partner with, create your own profile of this is why I could be a great operator. So two types of people reach out to you. Franchisors I'm looking to open in that territory, or investors that I'm looking for an operator for a great concept, like let's say Sandbox, that wants to be in this territory.
What are some of the franchises that you really believe in? For me personally, in terms of culture and business ethics, that when you work with them, they'll be a great business partner to work with. They have a great culture to their brand.
Yeah, so that's a tricky question because it's kind of like you're asking your parents, like, what is your favorite kid? And I think for us, what we try to do is try to be impartial in many ways. Yeah. And we don't claim to be franchise experts. So we claim to be like, it almost goes back to when Ken warned me, remember, you're not James Bond. So it's because there's a temptation when you're a strat and you're an analyst to start recommending as if you're the risk taker.
Right.
Like to start thinking, it's ego driven. So for us, but we do provide data where you can get reviews from current franchise owners on our website. We use all of that data to decide which concepts we have present at our events, because now it is our event and we are taking risk.
I think one useful idea to kind of like try to answer the question is that we talk about like a category leader. So usually, yes, some people approach it as like, I just want to find the most profitable thing, whatever it is, and I'll do it. But usually people, are not like that. They have a certain preference. Like they're like, I want to do an educational concept in this like territory in New York, right? So they have an idea. And then, okay, so we have the category of like youth enrichment. And then in a targeted way, you can go around, we have like, for example, we have a tag youth enrichment, and you're going to see maybe like 30, 50 concepts that are under that like umbrella. And then it makes your choice like a lot easier because you have specific metrics, right, to compare. And then you can find like, the top 3-4 brands. You can talk to them, go down their like interview process and like gather necessary information. And same with like events. Of course, there are also different stages of brands. Someone like Chick-fil-A has been around for like ages, and then there are franchisors that are emerging. So maybe it's their like 5th or 2nd or 3rd year of like operation. So depending on your category and, the earlier the franchisor is, the more like agency you will have as a franchisee because the system is so new. So you will be also driving the main brand, like as an early franchisee. In a more established brand, you're more just like, using all the like magic that they have discovered. You just need to like do it well in your territory. So yeah, depending on the like timeline since founding and the category, it gives you like enough metrics to like choose the right brand.
And remember, if you want to join us for the event, go to wearelatech.com/event. And you're going to be doing another one later in the year as well. So be sure to stay tuned on Wefranch.com. I don't want to end the podcast episode on a low note, but I really am curious about this question. What are 3 of the top mistakes people buying a franchise have made in maybe buying the wrong one or buying the right one, but then operating it in the wrong way? What are 3 top mistakes that is like,
So coming back to that idea of, you're the customer and then getting to the other side of being like the business owner, the franchisee. So I think the first thing, it can also be good, but people follow what they like. So they're like, I really like this juice place. So, and, they learn that like the juice place offers a franchise and they're like, I just want to do this. So as much as it is important and paramount to like follow what you like and believe, and if you also happen to be the customer of this business, and that's how a lot of franchisees discover their franchisors, is they're the customer first and they see like a line out of the door and they're like, I want to do this. It's also important to approach franchising as a serious investment, financial business decision that you need to think about rationally. So like, it's fine, like go and explore the juice concept, but like look at the numbers, compare it to like other brands, compare it to other categories, because you are committing, capital, like resources, and like most importantly, like your time, maybe like 5 years of your life, right? So just thinking about it as a business, like, yes, appreciating what you like, but also thinking about it like, from a financial business standpoint.
100%.
So the first one I agree with Mariyam. First, it's does the business work? Does it have pricing power? The second mistake we see people make, in many ways, they think of it too much like that. And you think of it more like you have to operate it. So like, so now I say, so first think about it, does this business work? But you're not just a passive investor like Warren Buffett is. Like, like when you put money into Apple, you never have to run it. They'll just tell you what, you have no agency. So you need to pick something where you actually enjoy getting into the nitty-gritty, where if something goes wrong and the manager doesn't show up, you can step in. If it gets flooded, you can go in there and fix it. And you can basically interact, you can be there. So I'll say picking something where you have some operational pull, you're not doing it just for the money. I think that matters. And I think the final thing is, maybe it wraps up the first 2, like sort of not being like long-term oriented. So for both franchises and franchisors, it's a long-term relationship, and I think it's the best way to do it. So if you're looking for some get-rich-quick scheme, so then it usually goes badly, like you're just making different kinds of decisions. So there is just something like only time you can't have, like Warren Buffett would say, you can't, be with like 9 people and have a kid in 1 month kind of thing. Some things just take time.
Yeah.
And you have to have that mindset.
And I'm going to contribute one. There's a franchise and there's a point in sharing this, that's going out of business, but I can tell that it's not because of the franchise, because I wish it wouldn't go out of business, but because I'm going to say the service, I'm purposely staying vague, the service is really great. I could tell from day one the owner didn't care. I switched from one location to another location that was closer to me. And it was so clear to me from day one that the owner was just looking for it to be passive. And I've just been watching the hiring choices, the lack of culture, the disconnection. I just got an email this past month, and it was funny to me because the email said something like it wasn't from the owner. It was from someone that works there. We've tried to make it work, but we just can't. It just does something like that. And I'm thinking, they have no idea that this could have been a completely, absolutely thriving business. But everyone that works there is so checked out. How do you expect anyone to want to sign up for your thing when no one's actually cares about the actual business? Everyone's just like looking, the employees are looking for a quick payday, the owner's looking for a quick payday, everyone's just looking for a quick pay. And then me as the customer, I feel it.
Yes.
That you're all just looking for a quick payday. Like, how about, like, you have amazing, I'm purposely staying vague, amazing setup, amazing things inside this business. I want to be a customer of your, like, I want to do this thing, but like, no one's like fueling the culture. So if any company that doesn't fuel culture in some regard, is franchise or not, is going to go out of business.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. And to highlight the model of franchising. So yeah, I think like a lot of times people think of like power imbalance, that the franchisor is so powerful. It's this big, huge company.
Yeah.
And, you know, you are just like a tiny person. They're going to squeeze you.
They did do that. They took pictures of the franchise owner every quarter. And I'm like, who cares? Like, yeah.
But I think like, you know, an example like that.
Franchisor. Like,
yeah. Like an example like that of a franchisee, let's say, going out of business or not doing well, it also directly hurts the franchisor. So, you know, it's something that they will have to report in their like franchise disclosure document, and then anyone can see it that, you know, that many territories, like locations had to be closed. So it's kind of like a failure on their end.
Yeah.
So it really is, you know, a long-term partnership. And, you know, when it doesn't work and it's like ends up in a divorce in franchising, it kind of like badly hurts both sides.
Yeah.
And as much as possible, you know, like both sides are trying to avoid it. Like the franchisee is trying to find a concept that you kind of like don't have to divorce from, you know, for as long as you want. And same for franchisor.
I mean, I just love what you said, that if your manager doesn't show up, be the owner, that you can show up and show up with joy. Like, that's what I would have liked to see. And I think that's what would have made this particular business. They have a great location. They have a great celebrity behind them. If they're blaming it on the I mean, it's just really not the franchise. I could tell as a customer, this is all like...
We need to do the Gordon Ramsay show where, you know, he comes and he remakes the franchise.
And I think they probably don't want to take accountability, and they'll probably end up blaming... But I can it's like black and white. Like, it's just so clear. So yeah, I think business education, when you're buying this or anything else, like continuously educate yourself how to be a business leader, how to build culture inside your brand. Just because it's someone else's brand doesn't mean it is now not also your brand if you become a franchisee. Thank you so much for hanging out with the WeAreLATech podcast. How can people connect with you? Why don't you go first this time, Greg?
So I think, you know, Wefranch.com, and I'm always on LinkedIn. Gregory Ugwi, UGWI. I'm always on LinkedIn.
UGWI. Cool. And you, Mariyam?
Same, yeah. Just we have our LinkedIn on the website, and I'm Mariyam Shamshadowa on LinkedIn.